Ever looked back at a relationship and thought, how did I miss all the red flags? She only called when she needed something. And somehow you were the one feeling guilty. What if the truth wasn't hidden, just uncomfortable and stoic? Wisdom is the lens you've been missing? Have you ever found yourself lying awake, replaying every moment of a past relationship, wondering how it all went wrong? You gave your time, your energy, even your peace, while she took what she needed and left you emotionally drained. You didn't feel uplifted after seeing her. You felt emptied. But still, you blamed yourself when everything finally collapsed. Before we dive into the core of this video, if you're someone who values emotional clarity, inner peace, and strength through wisdom, then you're in the right place. Stick with me until the very end, because these 6 signs rooted in timeless Stoic philosophy might just reshape the way you see love and how you protect your heart from now on. Let's take a step back, not just to your last relationship, all the way to ancient Rome. Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic emperor, once said, "If someone can prove me wrong and show me my mistake, I will gladly change. It is the truth I seek, and the truth never harmed anyone." That's exactly what this video is about, seeking truth. Even if it hurts, especially when it hurts. Because sometimes, pain is the very thing that clears your vision and becomes the shield that guards your soul from ever being used again. So let's set the stage. In today's world, we're constantly chasing what feels good, but we forget to ask what is good. You meet someone, she's magnetic, thrilling, and that spark? It's real. You start to believe, maybe this time it's different. But slowly, the spark fades. You stop smiling as much. You start apologizing for things you never even did. You walk on eggshells but convince yourself, she loves me. Right? Marcus Aurelius taught that we must train our perception to see beyond illusions and face reality without fear. That's what we're here to do today. Because the truth is, her love was conditional, and you didn't see it at first. Think back to that moment she first smiled at you. The way her eyes lit up. How her laugh made the whole world go quiet. It felt like everything before her was just waiting for this. You felt chosen, seen, even special. But now let me ask, did that love stay the same? Really think about it. Was her affection steady? Or did it quietly morph into something you had to earn? Because that's where many stories begin to twist. And for some of you, maybe this is exactly your story. Up next, we'll look at the first subtle shift, the way she praised you early on, and what it really meant. So we left off with a painful realization. Her love started to feel like something you had to earn. At first, your gestures felt meaningful. She'd smile sweetly when you brought her food. She told you, no one's ever cared like this. You canceled plans with your friends just to spend time with her. She'd look at you and say, "You're the only one who truly understands me." And that felt incredible, didn't it? You felt seen, wanted, needed. So you gave even more. But over time something shifted. The gratitude disappeared. What used to be appreciated was now expected, like it was your job to serve her happiness. Miss a single call? She went cold. Show up a few minutes late? Suddenly, you were the villain in her story. Her affection became conditional. It felt like a switch on when you pleased her, off when you didn't. And so you found yourself chasing that on feeling again, desperately. Doing more, just to get back a glimpse of the warmth she gave you in the beginning. And this is where Stoic wisdom hits with clarity. Marcus Aurelius said, "Be tolerant with others and strict with yourself." But ask yourself, what happens when you're the only one upholding that standard? when you're always hard on yourself, and she's never tolerant with you, that's when love begins to turn into manipulation. And maybe you couldn't see it clearly, because your heart was still trying to resurrect the woman you fell for. But here's the truth, she didn't change. That loving, nurturing version of her, it was never truly real. That wasn't who she was, it was who she presented herself as to hook you in. She made you feel like a king, so that you'd spend the rest of the relationship working to earn back a crown she never intended to give you permanently. And I get it. It's hard to see it while you're in it. You hold on to those sweet memories, the soft mornings, the random "I miss you" texts, the way she curled up next to you like you were her home, her safe place. But now I have to ask you again. Was her love truly consistent, or was it always conditional? Because if her love only showed up when you played by her rules, if it disappeared when you needed space, or when you made a mistake, or when you were simply human, then it wasn't love. It was leverage. You weren't being loved. You were being controlled by affection handed out like a reward. And listen, that's not your fault. But now that you see it, it becomes your responsibility to no longer ignore it. So don't look away from this truth. Stay grounded, stay present. Because once you recognize the first sign, the rest become impossible to unsee. And in the next part, we'll uncover something even deeper. What happens when your needs, your real, emotional needs, are treated like an inconvenience? Let's take a closer look. Previously, we talked about how her love felt more like leverage than care. But it didn't stop there. It went deeper into the moments when you needed support and got silence instead. The truth is, we rarely recognize this pattern while we're still inside it, because we've been conditioned, especially as men, to believe that showing emotion makes us weak, that asking for support is somehow a flaw. So when she sighed as you opened up, when she rolled her eyes as you shared something painful, you didn't call it out. Instead, you turned the blame inward. You told yourself things like, "She's probably just having a bad day," or "I don't want to be a burden, I'll be fine. I always am." Sound familiar? It probably started in subtle ways. Maybe you told her work had been overwhelming, and instead of listening, she redirected the conversation to her issues again. Or maybe you hinted that you were feeling down, and she brushed it aside with a change of subject. And slowly, you noticed something. Your emotions didn't matter. Your feelings were just background noise to the drama of her spotlight. But perhaps the most painful part, you accepted it. Not because you believed you deserved to be ignored, but because somewhere along the line, you were taught that love means always putting her first. Marcus Aurelius once said, "To love only what happens, what was destined." No greater harmony. But what happens when what's happening to you, day after day, isn't harmony at all, but a quiet erosion of your self-worth? You begin to shrink. You stop opening up. You put on a mask that says, "I'm fine," even when your soul is screaming. Otherwise, you become a ghost in your own relationship. There physically, but emotionally invisible. And her? She only showed up when she needed something. You gave her comfort, time, loyalty, energy. She gave you silence, conditions, emotional distance. So let me ask you, did you ever cry and feel ashamed of it in front of her? Did you ever hesitate to speak your truth because you feared she'd be annoyed? Did you ever sit in your car after an argument, staring into space, wondering how you could feel so completely alone? While still being in a relationship, you're not crazy for noticing. You're not weak for feeling. You're human. Stoic philosophy doesn't ask us to suppress emotion. It teaches us to master it. But how can you master something you were never allowed to express? If she made your emotions feel like a burden, if she turned your vulnerability into a weapon, if she made you feel guilty for simply having needs, then that wasn't love. That was tolerance. And barely even that. And that is a dangerous place to be, because over time you stop asking for anything. You become the silent partner, the emotional rock, with cracks that no one sees. But here's the raw truth. Even rocks break when the pressure becomes too much. So if this feels like your story, don't shut down, don't retreat. You've already given too much silence to someone who refused to listen. In the next section, we'll talk about the one thing she gave you that kept you hooked, even when everything else was missing. Last time, we talked about how staying silent for too long breaks even the strongest hearts. Now it's time to give your truth the voice it's always deserved. You are not too emotional. You are not needy. You are not weak. You simply wanted someone who could love you with the same depth and sincerity that you gave to her. And if that feels like your story, don't look away now. We're not finished. There's still more truth to uncover, and the clarity you've been needing is just a few realizations away. Let's talk about something even more subtle and far more damaging. She played the victim masterfully. Have you ever been in an argument where you knew you weren't being unfair or cruel, but somehow you were the one who ended up apologizing? You weren't yelling. You weren't disrespectful. You were simply expressing how you felt. Maybe you even said it gently, something like, "I feel like you've been distant lately." And instead of listening, she folded her arms, let out a dramatic sigh, and snapped back, "Wow, I can't believe you think that, after everything I've done for you." Just like that, the spotlight shifts. Suddenly, it's not about your feelings anymore, it's about hers. And somehow, you're the villain in the story. She flipped the script so smoothly, so emotionally, that you began to doubt your own perspective. You heard yourself saying things like, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. Maybe I'm just overthinking again. Maybe it's my fault." But was it really? No, it wasn't. What you experienced wasn't emotional sensitivity. It was gaslighting disguised as fragility. Marcus Aurelius once said, "If anyone can refute me, show me. I'm making a mistake, I'll gladly change. What I seek is the truth." But she wasn't seeking truth. She was seeking control. And how did she control the narrative? Through her tears, through guilt, through well-timed emotional wounds that shifted accountability away from her and back onto you. She made you question your memory like you hadn't said it kindly. She made you question your tone like you were being aggressive. She made you question your intentions like your feelings were an attack. Because that's what skilled manipulators do. They take your love and use it against you. They know you care deeply. They know you don't want to hurt them. So they weaponize that compassion to escape responsibility. Let me ask you this. How many times did you leave a conversation feeling worse, even though you walked in trying to make things better? How many times did you bury your truth just to avoid upsetting her? How many times did you end up reassuring her when you were the one in pain? You weren't toxic. You weren't controlling. You were trying desperately to speak up for yourself. But with her, speaking your truth became an act of war. And let's be honest, that's not love. That's psychological warfare. You kept asking yourself, why does she always play the victim? Why does every mistake end with me proving my loyalty? Why does it feel like I'm always the one on trial? In the next section, we'll face a harsh truth, how she used these trials not to fix the relationship, but to gain power. And once you see this, it becomes impossible to unsee the last part. We uncovered a painful pattern, how she twisted every confrontation into a trial where you were always the one on the stand. Now let's go even deeper, because this next truth cuts to the core of why you stayed. She didn't want a partner. She wanted a fan club. Someone who would cheer when she was happy and stay silent when she was wrong. And that someone was you. But the moment you stopped clapping, the moment you spoke your truth, set a boundary, or dared to question her behavior, she flipped the narrative. You were no longer the supportive man. You were now the villain in her story. And that's how she kept using you, not just for your time or energy, but for your guilt, for your empathy, for that part of you that just wanted to make things right, even when she was the one who broke it in the first place. So if you're sitting there, nodding silently, remembering every time you said, "I'm sorry," just to keep the peace, I need you to stay with me. Because once you see this pattern for what it really is, you won't fall for it again. And what we're about to cover next, it hits even harder. Let's talk about how she made you feel guilty for simply wanting more. Have you ever found yourself lying in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, asking, "Why do I feel guilty for wanting what I know I deserve?" You didn't want anything unreasonable. You wanted more of her time, more affection, more clarity, more effort. But just asking for those things made you feel like a burden. In the beginning, she gave you just enough to feel hopeful. A sweet text here, a long call there, a kiss that felt like it actually meant something. And you told yourself, this could be something real. She's different. But slowly, those small signs of care started fading. She flaked on plans. She ignored your messages but stayed active online. She pulled away just when you tried to draw her closer. And when you finally spoke up, when you bravely asked for more, she flipped the script again. Why are you being so extra? Why can't you just relax? You're so clingy lately. Sound familiar? You weren't asking her to give you the world. You weren't asking her to abandon her freedom. You were asking for something simple: consistency, connection, to feel like you mattered. But instead, she made you feel ashamed for even needing that. And that's where manipulation quietly sneaks in. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking." But what happens when the person you love rewires that thinking? When they teach you that your basic emotional needs are somehow too much? That's not stoicism. That's not strength. That's emotional starvation. She fed you crumbs and convinced you it was a feast. And you accepted it because you were in love. And the thing about love is, it makes us believe that maybe, just maybe, this time, things will change. But what happens when love becomes one-sided? In the next part, we'll face the truth about effort, loyalty, and the painful imbalance that's easy to overlook when your heart is too full and your hands are too empty. Previously, we explored how love made you settle for less, how you quieted your needs in the hope that one day she might give more. Now let's talk about one of the most painful realizations of all, when you needed her the most, and she simply wasn't there. Love makes us patient. It makes us believe in second chances. It whispers, maybe next week will be different. So you started lowering your standards. You stopped asking, stopped expecting. You trained yourself to be content with the bare minimum, because every time you reached for more, it came at a cost. A cold shoulder, a withdrawal of affection. That tiny spark of connection you were fighting to keep would flicker and vanish. But let me ask you something only you can answer honestly. Didn't you deserve someone who wanted to give freely? Not because they were pressured, but because they cared? Didn't you deserve love that felt mutual, not conditional, not transactional? Because if every conversation about your needs ended in guilt, if she made you feel like you were the problem every time you opened your heart, then what you had wasn't love. It was control. And it worked because you loved her enough to doubt yourself. You gave her the benefit of the doubt so often that you stopped trusting your own intuition. But not anymore. The moment you recognize your needs as valid, the moment you stop apologizing for wanting more, is the moment you begin to reclaim your power. So if this part of the story feels like it's yours, stay with me, because what we're about to uncover next hits even deeper. She was absent when you needed her most. Think back to that one moment when life slammed you hardest. Maybe it was losing your job. Maybe it was a family emergency. Maybe it was just one of those nights where your chest felt heavy, and all you needed was someone, just one person, to sit beside you and say, "I'm here, I've got you." Did she show up, or did she disappear? Don't think about the good days. Think about the hard ones. The ones that shattered you. Did she check in? Did she listen without judgment, without rushing to talk about herself? Did she stay present, even when the world around you felt like it was caving in? Or did she grow distant? Did she go silent? Did she change the subject, make your pain feel like an inconvenience? Because love, real love, isn't about who shows up when things are bright and easy. It's about who stays when everything around you is falling to pieces. And you were left holding the shattered pieces of your life, alone. But here's what stings even more. You didn't blame her. You made excuses for her absence. She's probably overwhelmed. She's not great with emotions. Maybe I shouldn't need her this much. That's how deep the conditioning went. Marcus Aurelius once said, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." And in your heart, you knew it wasn't right. You knew her silence wasn't love, but still, you said nothing. Why? Because you were afraid to lose her. You thought, if I just stay strong, maybe she'll come back around. So you swallowed the pain, put on a brave face, told yourself, it's okay, I can handle this. But let's be honest, it wasn't okay. You were bleeding inside. And in the next part, we'll talk about the wounds you carried in silence, and the moment you finally realized that love shouldn't feel like loneliness dressed up as loyalty. In the last part, we talked about the pain of showing up for someone who disappears when you need them most. But sometimes, the heartbreak cuts even deeper when that person is physically there, yet emotionally completely gone. You were bleeding on the inside, and the one person who should have cared just kept walking. And when she finally reappeared, it wasn't to comfort you. It wasn't to ask how you were coping or to sit in the silence with you. She came back to talk about herself, to shift the focus, to act like nothing ever happened. And in that moment, you didn't just feel hurt, you felt invisible. Like your storm didn't matter. Like your pain was just an inconvenience she'd rather not acknowledge. So let me ask you again, what kind of love disappears when it's needed most? The truth? She was never truly invested in you. She was invested in what you gave her, your attention, your energy, your emotional labor. But when it was time to reciprocate, when it was her turn to show up for you, she vanished like a shadow, dissolving at sunrise. And yet, you stayed. You stayed because you remembered the good days. You remembered her laughter, the softness of her voice, the way she used to look at you like you were everything. You clung to those early moments, the ones where she did show up. And you convinced yourself, those memories must mean something. That love must have been real. But let's face the truth. Love that disappears in your darkest hour is not love. It's performance. It's convenience. It's conditional. And you don't need to carry the weight of that anymore. You didn't need someone to only smile in the sunshine. You needed someone who could stand with you in the storm. So if you've ever sat in silence, asking yourself, why couldn't she just be there when I needed her most? You're not alone. This chapter isn't just yours. It belongs to far too many. Now, let's talk about something even more painful. You felt alone, even when she was right beside you. Have you ever laid in bed next to someone, hearing her breathe, feeling the warmth of her skin, reaching out to touch her hand, and still felt utterly alone? Like the body was there, but the heart had already left? And the most painful part? She didn't even notice, because loneliness doesn't always come from being physically alone. Sometimes the loneliest place on earth is lying next to someone who stopped seeing you a long time ago. Does that sound familiar? Maybe you tried to talk to her, but she was always distracted scrolling on her phone, replying to messages present in body but not in mind. Maybe you opened up, shared your fears, your dreams, your struggles, and all you got was a blank stare or a half-hearted, You were trying to connect. She was just passing time. And in those quiet, heavy moments, you started to wonder, is this really what love is supposed to feel like? You used to laugh together. You used to have those late-night talks about everything and nothing. You used to feel seen when she looked at you. But somewhere along the way, that silence between you grew louder, heavier, more permanent. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Nowhere you can go is more peaceful, more free of interruptions than your own soul." In the next section, we'll talk about how solitude once feared can become the beginning of your healing. Because when you stop chasing love that leaves you empty, you begin to find the peace you were always worthy of. In the last part, we uncovered one of the most painful truths: feeling completely alone next to someone who once made your heart race. And when that silence becomes louder than any words, you begin to realize you weren't in a relationship. You were in a performance. You played your part. You smiled when it hurt. You showed up when you were breaking inside. All while your soul was quietly screaming to be seen, to be heard, to be held. And the worst part? You blamed yourself. You wondered if maybe you had changed. Maybe you weren't exciting anymore. Maybe you were too emotional, too quiet, too difficult to love. So you said, if I just try harder, maybe she'll come back. So you stayed, you gave more. You reached deeper. And the more she pulled away, the tighter you held on. But let me ask you this honestly. Should love feel like a one-man rescue mission? Should it feel like you're trying to save someone who's already halfway out the door? If her presence made you feel lonelier than her absence ever did, that wasn't love. That was emotional abandonment. She was there in body but not in spirit, and your soul knew it. That's why you started feeling empty. That's why your laughter became forced. That's why you lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering, how did we get here? But here's the truth. It wasn't your fault. You weren't asking for too much. You were asking for something sacred: effort, reciprocity, presence. Love that actually sees you, but she was never really with you. And somewhere deep down, you always sense that. So if you've ever faked a smile at dinner just to avoid another cold, distant night, if you've ever stared into the face of someone who used to feel like home and felt like a stranger in your own heart, then this isn't just a story. It's your story. But here's where the shift begins. Now that you see it clearly, you don't have to live it anymore. And let me say this, because maybe you've been waiting to hear it. She didn't break you. She revealed the cracks, the places where you lacked boundaries, where you silenced your intuition, where you mistook being needed for being loved. Yes, it hurts. But pain is where transformation begins. The Stoics never tried to avoid suffering. They embraced it to sharpen the soul. Use what happened not as a reason to hate, but as a lesson to grow. Because the very moment your eyes open to the truth is the moment you begin to reclaim your power. So what now? You reflect, you rebuild, you rise. And above all, you forgive. Forgive yourself for the blindness, for the hope, for the holding on, because that wasn't weakness, that was love. And love is never foolish, it's deeply human. But now, you know better. Now you walk with your eyes open. Now you live with intention. Now, you love with wisdom. Thank you for watching. If this spoke to your soul, let it guide you. Because the truth doesn't break you, it frees you.